All right, hello and welcome to our second LBUSD information Q&A session. I'm your moderator, Chris Itzen from the Marketing and Media Service team. And I'm excited to be here with our panel guests. We have a lot today who will be sharing with those watching about effective strategies for distance learning. If you missed our first info session on health and safety protocols, you can check it out at lbschools.net/YouTube. But for today, we're gonna focus on distance learning, really focusing on instruction. So to clarify with our audience, we're not really getting into opening of schools or those kind of logistics. This is really about engaging students and how this group of amazing teachers and principals connected during the SEAL program, which we'll talk about in a minute. So we're gonna dig deep when it comes to online learning. And so I'd like to briefly introduce our panel, and we have a full virtual house today. You'll notice we're not wearing masks. That's because we are all virtual right now. Nobody is in the room together. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce all of them. Before I start that, I'll say today's panel are teachers and principals who participated in the Summer Enrichment and Learning Program, also known as SEAL, this summer. The program ran from June 22nd to July 17th for elementary and middle school students. And it was a support program for students that was all virtual and provided 2 hours of synchronous instruction per day in ELA and math. So I'm going to start with our panel, and then we'll get right into the first part of our day, which is going to be just discussing several topics that were advertised for this event. And then we will be taking several questions from some of our LBUSD teachers and community that sent us emails over the last 24 hours. So welcome to our panel. We have the following educators joining us today: April Campos, first grade teacher from Longfellow Elementary; Zariq Schottler, elementary math coach, Teacher Resource Center; Jamaica Ross, fourth grade teacher from Webster Elementary; Roberto Licon, fourth grade teacher from Oropesa Elementary; Sandra Velasco, fifth grade teacher from Lafayette; Nicole Lopez, second grade teacher from Jane Addams; Armando Duenas, principal at Jane Addams; Knock Wynn, assistant principal at Rogers Middle School; and Kimia Jones, seventh grade teacher from Robinson K-8. And am I missing anybody? I don't think so. I think that's everybody's here. So welcome to our panel. We are gonna jump in. Everybody wave, say hi. Can hear me? All right, perfect, just checking. All right, so we'll start with our topics. Thank you all for being here. We're excited to share this with our Long Beach community. So the first question or topic we're gonna discuss is, I'll share the topic and then you can raise your hand, we'll pop you in and then we'll have a conversation. So the first topic is, let's start with the heart of instruction. So establishing trust and relationship with students in the digital environment. So what are some strategies of connecting with your students in this format? All right, and we will start with Jamaica.
Hi, thank you. Some of the things I jotted down is just to make sure that I remembered to say them were, most certainly one of the things I tried to do was come early each time. So open up the meet earlier than it was supposed to be and stayed a little bit afterwards, because that allowed children to communicate with each other a little bit and then also communicate with me as they wanted. On a daily basis, welcomed children in daily by their names. And if by chance I had to go and support my own children, somebody was assigned to be the greeter. So every time somebody came in, children were greeted by their names. So that's all I'll say for now. I'm sure everybody else is gonna say some of the other things that I was gonna share.
Awesome, thank you, Jamaica. So let's add to that. So Roberto, why don't you drop in and let us know your thoughts on engaging students, building trust?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Robert Licon from Oropesa Elementary. Building trust, we all know that it's the basic foundation in building relationships with any student. Understanding their feelings, always giving them positive reinforcement. Jamaica, thank you for bringing that up. Getting there early, staying after was really key. Smiling and understanding their feelings, especially as students became more aware of the racial dynamics after the post-George Floyd murders. We all know that building these relationships will also be the key ingredient for all of our students to continue coming back to our classrooms day in and day out as we continue in the fall. So I'll leave it up to the rest of you. There you go.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Nicole Lopez.
Hi, just kind of piggyback off of Jamaica. I think coming early and giving the kids a chance to share and talk with you, and then also kind of letting them freely express themselves within the lessons. So maybe they had that connection to themselves, their connection to the outside world, and letting them share that and kind of discussing that as a group kind of made them feel more welcome, and it wasn't just strictly academics, but having that connection with them.
Thank you. And let's move to Sandra, Ms. Velasco.
So for me, it was really, I had the privilege to teach newcomers. So it was really important for me to understand that there were outside forces that they were dealing with as newcomers to our country. So I started with my story, and I made that connection, that personal connection about how I was as a learner, English learner, when I came, how long it took me to feel a little bit more comfortable with the language, and that I was with them in this journey. So really being vulnerable and helping them understand that we all have a story. We are where we are because of our stories, but we're not defined by what has happened to us, but what we do on an everyday basis. So that's what I would say that helped me make connections with my students this summer.
Thank you very much, Sandra. And let's move on to Armando. Mr. Duenas, we are not catching your audio right now. Sorry to cut you off. You're not muted, but we're not hearing. We're having some technical difficulties. I'm gonna jump to Ms. Campos, and then we'll come back to you. That's okay.
I like what everybody said so far. To me, that was my biggest concern as a teacher, was how am I going to make those U6 relationships with my new students? You know, in the spring, we had that relationship already built in. And so that was a little bit more comfortable. They knew us, we knew them. But with this, I wasn't sure. And so really that coming early, like Jamaica said, and Nicole talked about too, that was huge. Greeting people by name, getting to know them, and then just giving myself permission to take it day by day and build those relationships, just like we would do in the classroom. It didn't happen in one day, didn't happen in 1 week. It took time, and I gave it that time and just knew this was gonna have to be something that was going to be fostered, just being really aware of that and really trying to build that consistently each and every day. We had a spinner that we would use with getting to know you questions, things like that, where it wasn't always content driven, although you can embed it in content, but it wasn't always content driven. It was just like what we would do in class.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So let's let's go back to Armando, see how your audio is. No, we're still not getting your audio, sir. Sorry. All right, so let's jump in. So great. So talking about those connections, and really, you know, it's powerful to see each individual talk about forgetting about this barrier that we have, right, with technology and being able to still dig deep and find those connections with students. So let's jump from there, and we'll go to the next question or topic, and that is incorporating social emotional learning skill building or attending to students' well-being while also delivering the content. So you talked about, you know, building that rapport and that initial trust, but then how did you maintain that social emotional skill building? Students are going through a lot of trauma right now, on top of, you know, everyday life with everything that's happening and where we're at, but then also attending to their well-being while also still delivering your content. You're there to teach. How did you connect with students to take care of their well-being? And it looks like Nicole jumped right into that. We'll start with Nicole.
I, as a second grade teacher, relied very heavily on the SEL curriculum that was provided for us during SEAL. And most days we spent more than the allotted 15 minutes, just because the kids had so much to share. And as we built those relationships, they didn't want to stop talking. They just kept going, and giving them that time to really build the trust among each other as well as myself was really reinforced with the social emotional videos and the questions, and it really got them to express what they were feeling.
Awesome, thank you very much. Let's jump to Zarik. Want to jump in on this one, talking about
Absolutely.
well-being with your students?
Absolutely. So just like Nicole said, there was amazing SEL curriculum already embedded in the SEAL curriculum, which is great, that incorporated videos and songs. And but I think it ties back to the first question, which we were talking about, that U6, building relationships, because once you built that relationship, you also built trust with the students. And I saw, like April said, over time, as my trust increased with the students, they entrusted me with their feelings a little bit more. And so I think that those two went hand in hand. We used a lot of reflection tools. And it was neat to see how those reflections became more trustworthy and more honest as the week went on. And as everybody mentioned, I was hesitant, right, to teach online and never taught online. So how am I going to see these kids and build these relationships? And it happened. And like April said, over time. So I believe building that relationship with trust and then making the appropriate time for them to share and give them the strategies that they need to deal with their feelings as well.
Awesome, thank you. So let's go to Miss Wynn.
Hi, so definitely having the social emotional check-ins at the beginning of every single class was very helpful. I used a add-on Pear Deck, which is an opportunity for teachers to create Google Slides but make it interactive. And so Pear Deck already has some templates for social emotional check-ins. And so having that at the beginning to frame where your kids, getting to see where your kids are coming at the beginning of the lesson. So I always use that check-in, and then I always use the chat feature to then check in with them on, hey, I'm here during office hours, if there's anything that you want to talk or touch upon. And so there's those tools, but I definitely agree that it's all about getting to know your kids, building trust. And I had the opportunity to have both my Rogers students, but then I had students from different school. And I found that it was easier to build rapport quicker, right, with the students that already knew me. But for students that I didn't know and have a relationship with, it was still easy to build those relationships, but it just took a little bit more time.
Thank you very much. So we'll continue the conversation. This is awesome to hear that from a large group, how you're able to be successful with connecting with students in this new world, right? When we came from March 13th of just the trauma of how are we going to do this, to then these more and more lessons learned and kind of evolving this process. So let's turn it over to Ms. Jones and continue the conversation.
So honestly, just going off of what everyone else is saying, that relationship is everything. And one thing that we would do is we would have, I want to say, a midweek check-in with Google Forms, just like a survey. It was their exit slip, no math, just talk to me. Like, how are you doing? What's going on? I hesitate to say midweek because I would sometimes do it more than once. So sometimes at the beginning, sometimes at the end of the week. But I agree with what was said earlier, because they did become a lot more open and a lot more honest as the weeks went on. The majority of my students I had never met before. They came from a completely different school. And so I was very concerned, especially with 7th grade, about how those relationships are going to go. But just being very honest with them, even from the beginning. Hey guys, this is new. This is new for us. So here I am, here you are, let's figure this out together. That honesty is huge. And with the surveys, beyond the SEL check-in, just asking, what'd you do this weekend? On the survey. So not taking class time, but then mentioning that maybe when I did come early, because that's a huge thing. Thank you for mentioning that. When I came early, I would mention someone who talked about playing soccer, someone who talked about finally getting a flip down, someone who learned a new dance online. So I would bring those things up, and I would ask them if it was okay for me to share these things, if I could share their name, or if I could just share the activity. And they would let me know. And that really helped with building those connections, especially with middle schoolers, because they're a little bit, I think, a little less open at that age. And so that can be a little scary, but it is possible.
Awesome, thank you. Let's continue the conversation. So we're going to go 2 more for this one. So let's go to Ms. Ross, and then we'll get a couple more. There's a lot of hands up, which is great, but I want to get even in the rest of the topics as well as we go.
I just wanted to add, I feel like a lot of what we're talking about, which is super important, is our relationship with children and social emotional, but I think it's also important to put out there the importance of the children being able to connect with each other, because I have my own children at home, and my son is really struggling with not being able to connect with his classmates. And so that is something that I noticed happening over time too. As you leave for the break, as you give them a break, but you leave the chat available, then they start to, trade with Roblox names and things like that so that they can then connect. And I also had children from my own class and then children from another school. And it takes a little time for that to happen. So over time, after a couple weeks, they were starting to try and engage with each other. And I think the key things are time. And then I think it'll be great with Zoom because there's breakout groups and they'll have opportunities to not just connect with teachers, which is so key because they need that touchstone, but also having a communication with their peers. It's so important for their emotional growth and learning and stability.
And that's a great point. I mean, you think about our students, they're more comfortable with technology than we are oftentimes, and they're used to that chatting and stuff. So you just brought it into that classroom environment. Like, what a great addition to that after building that. So we're going to do 2 more people for this one, and then we're going to move into the, so we'll go Ms. Schottler and then Mr. Lee-Cohn.
I just wanted to add on to the other comments where teachers were coming in early and building the relationships within each other, because I too had not had students that I'd never seen before. So, and they came from different schools as well. So to build that classroom culture and climate, like you would do in the regular classroom, getting to know activities, but also sharing, like Mrs. Jones just shared, how adding on to what they just said, what do they do? So it was really neat to see that the interaction with each other in Jamaica. I would always say, I have my ear pods on so I can hear your conversations, but feel free to chat during the break. And it was neat that the conversations got louder and during break, and I allowed them to talk in the Google Classroom as well. So by the end, they were making dates to play Roblox as well. So just, it happens over time.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so for the last one for this topic, we're going to go to Mr. Lee-Cohn, and then we're going to jump to a new topic.
Yes, many of you already mentioned a lot of things that were happening within my classroom as well. Having those mental check-ins in the mornings was very, very critical for students to continue to build that trust with you, healing any pain that they may have, whatever they're encountering. But also having communication and consistency. Those students, you reduce stress when you give them consistency. And I saw that CEO did provide that with having a set time of when we needed to be at class from 9 to 11. And that helped a lot. And also keeping the communication open with Class Dojo with parents as well, helped a lot as well. So just reducing the stress for the students, having those mental check-ins did cause that relationship to build. And it was easy for me. I think, like Nicole said, I had a lot of students from my own school or Ms. Moon that were already in my class. So it was easy to build those relationships really quickly.
All right, thank you. I know we still have more hands, but we're going to jump to the next topic. I want to get into some instructional side of it. So let's start with engagement. So you've talked about building that rapport and trust, those connections, and that social emotional side. So then how did you encourage active engagement or group discussion during class time? You've obviously touched on it already, that the students were connecting. So is there any more we can expand on that, on how you enhance that group discussion, active engagements during your instruction? All right, Mr. Duenas, you ready?
All right, thank you so much. Is this working now? Perfect. A couple things I want to add with regards to engagement, and I was fortunate to have been able to teach students that were not part of the community where I work, and so building that trust took some time because they didn't know me, and so a couple things that I do want to point out is part of that engagement is my engagement with the students. And so I was extremely mindful of my own body language, of my own tone, just how I presented myself. And that allowed a couple things. One, to build the trust. And then two, for first graders going on to second, to feel like they're part of this learning community. And then, of course, giving them time to process, time to think, as I provided, that small group instruction. So it's through those things that I did that allowed for two things. One, the trust, which then the more trust, the more then students were able to be engaged. And then lastly, having that parent contact and or communication. So when students did not engage, or when students appeared to be disengaged, a quick messaging to the parents, sometimes it's all it took to get them back on track. And therefore the child knew that it wasn't just the teacher and the student, but there was a true collaboration between the teacher, the parent, and then the child. And I think those three in combination are really what supported that effort.
Thank you. And I'm so glad we got you on. And I just saw a bunch of head nods, everybody in agreement on that, right? And talking about that modeling. So let's go back to Miss Jones and we'll continue the conversation.
So thinking about engagement, I actually was hoping that Miss Wynn would talk first, only because I got the best ideas from her with using Pear Deck. I had to write her a thank you note. It changed like my whole remote teaching world. Seriously, I have told teachers in and outside of LBUSD that it's the most amazing tool, because I was able to create these interactive slides where I could throw problems into my lesson and I could see the kids actually working them out. And if they were stuck, I told them, don't leave it blank. Write me a note. You don't have to put it in the chat. You don't have to tell anybody else. Like, tell me, let me know, and we'll talk through it. I could write them a little note on there. Or there's a little chat feature on there that you could use. Yeah, the Pear Deck add-on was major and massive in terms of turning my class around. I just used regular Google Slides the first week, but the second week using the Pear Deck, a lot more engagement. It was like night and day. And again, with the older kids, they don't want to be there. You're not cool to them. Like they're there because they have to be. That actually made it fun. So even my end of course survey that I had them complete, the thing that they mentioned the most that they really enjoyed, and they didn't have to write their names. I told them they could just say, this class was horrible, we hated it, Miss Jones, and then leave. But they all loved Pear Deck so much. So that was huge. That was huge. And I suggest that everyone who hasn't gone into it, check it out. It's a major help. So.
Well, thank you. Well, on that note, we'll go in reverse then and we'll go to Miss Wynn. And I have to give her a shout out because if any of you follow her on Twitter, she's always sharing awesome strategies and things that she's working on. So Miss Wynn, go right ahead.
Thanks, Ms. Jones. Thanks, Mr. Itzen. So definitely Pear Deck. It's comparable to Nearpod. If those of you who are familiar with that platform, just the ability to see student live and their responses made me kind of consider even the aspect of, are you going to require students to turn on their videos? And so that's a comfort thing. And so I was always mindful about eliciting feedback from the students. And so some of the feedback that when I asked, why are you not turning on your video camera? A kiddo said that his mom took his table away, so his room is messy. His little brother is in his room, so he doesn't want his little brother on camera. I had a student who said, I just woke up, so I don't want to be on camera. And other students said, they're just more comfortable not having their video camera on. And so it's something where you're going to give and take on these as a teacher to make those decisions and make those calls on what you're going to require or not. Definitely we want to see them so that way we can engage, but students have a myriad of reasons and why they may or may not be having their video camera on. And so I definitely use, again, Pear Deck, but the breakout groups and using that feature where having to teach the kids, hey, I'm going to break you up into groups. You're going to be working together. And so students you find actually are more comfortable turning on their video camera in smaller group settings than in larger. And so, I made a deal with them. Hey, if I'm working with you one-on-one, then I want you to turn on your video camera, and students are really receptive to that. So definitely a lot of engagement tools. The other thing that I listened to feedback on, kids love Kahoot. I think adults love Kahoot, which is also comparable to quizzes. So just a fun way where the kids use the term play. They like to play Kahoot, and anytime that they're thinking that they're playing and that they're actually learning at the same time is definitely a good thing. So.
Thank you. And we're going to circle back for everybody to talking about apps a little bit in just a second, but we're going to go one more on this. And I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of hands up, but this time is short and I want to make sure we get a lot of questions out here. So Ms. Velasco, why don't you finish us off for this question?
For me, engagement was a little bit tricky because my students were learning English and I was supposed to be teaching them English. So I asked them what their preferences were. I asked them what they wanted to do. I allowed them to tell me in their primary language if it was Spanish, because I speak Spanish. There were a lot of different things that I allowed them to be part of the decision making because I wanted them to come back. And one thing that really helped was that I share my agenda with them on a daily basis. This is what we're going to do today. What do you guys think? And they loved Jamboard. That was the most comfortable way of sharing their learning. So once I found that out, then we became experts at Jamboard. So for me, I think the engagement came from getting to know what they really felt comfortable with and really using those strategies and tools and continue to have those conversations. They graded me every week and they told me what they liked, what they didn't like, and what they wanted to do the next week. And so art became part of our curriculum. Art became part of our experience because they wanted to do that. And that kept them coming. We had nearly perfect attendance. So I think that just listening to their wants was important for my class this summer.
Well, thank you. So we're gonna continue this conversation, but so I'm gonna go to Mr. Lacone next, but I want to add a piece to it. So talking about engagement, but also expand on any of the apps you've already mentioned, like Nearpod or Pear Deck or anything else that you use Kahoot that really engaged your students. Let's add that. We can, if there's any more thoughts on that as well.
Yes, I want to go ahead and just piggyback off what Ms. Velasco said. Jamboard became our jam, literally. The students really enjoyed it. So I want to thank all those teachers that suggested it out there, friends of mine and fellow teachers and colleagues. So the Jamboard allowed students and teachers and students the opportunity to see real-time feedback. We could give feedback. We can see exactly what was going on. One of the things that I really enjoyed was to be able to copy and paste the same page on, I believe, 18 to 20 of the pages on Jamboard, allowing me to give each kid a page number. And that way I can hop back and forth from student to student. And while students working on their work independently and muted, I could hop in and give kids suggestions right in there. And it was a piece of accountability. Sometimes kids were on, and when they were supposed to be doing work, all of a sudden you see a blank page and you immediately could figure out who was on at that time and give parents information via text messages or class dojo to let them know that their students were either actively participating or not.
All right, so let's add to this list. Let's see hands up. So let's go to what are effective ways in your instruction that you found and checking for understanding during direct instruction. What was your process for checks for understanding? All right, Mr. Duenas, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll start off, and again, just to, it was first graders going into second grade, and so some of these apps that are wonderful, I tried playing with them, but really, the most effective way of getting kids to learn when I think about it, is real small chunks of instruction, just sizable bite chunks of it, and so really when you think of different learning models, it's it could be focused instruction and then a break, or guided instruction and then a break. And then I learned that allowed students to process the information, and therefore too, at the same time, it gave me an opportunity, because it was a smaller class, to be able to check individually, because through the video you can see the body language, so you can interpret, are they getting it, are they not getting it, and so being mindful of where you are in your lesson. Again, small sizable chunks allows you to immediately redirect or change sort of the course with the support that you provide them, or checking for understanding.
Awesome, thank you very much. And let's go to Ms. Schottler.
So like others have mentioned, it was really easy on the Jamboards to go through and check for understanding as students are working. I was able to look and give immediate feedback on some students using a Post-it note, other times just verbal feedback. I had fifth graders, so the complete opposite, Mr. Duenas. So they were, ready to tack on as many different apps as they could. They really enjoyed working in paper and pencil, and then just taking a picture of their work and uploading it in a chart. That was really neat for me to see, because as the work was coming in, I was able to assess and then also give feedback. But it was also really great because I can look at it later, check for understanding, and move my lesson forth that way. So it was neat to use for fifth graders a variety of ways, but they still enjoyed the different platforms. And surprisingly, they really liked ST Math. So we used a couple of the puzzles with them. And just like Mrs. Velasco mentioned, I would ask them, what worked well today? What didn't you like? And that was one thing they kept asking for more of. And so, the next day in instruction, I'd say, well, you guys asked for more ST Math, so we're going to do this today. So it was really neat to check for understanding with the reflections, as well as the different platforms that we have.
Thank you. All right, and we'll finish this question off with Ms. Ross.
Wonderful, thank you. I was just thinking of a few things to add to what was being said before. Another great source for checking for understanding right away is similar to Jamboard, is Whiteboard-Fi. So right there, you can actually see them writing in that moment. They put their name on it. And so you can quickly give feedback as well. I used it a lot in the spring with my class in math before a lot of other things were brought to light. And Jamboard also, I think, just old school as well, and also teaching children to use their microphones so we can hear their voice. I know that's very tricky. I totally get that with the noise in the background, but oftentimes, depending to support the pacing of instruction, sometimes you're calling on people who are volunteering, and then other times you're calling randomly, because what I found in SEAL was that some of the students really knew, but it's tricky to navigate how you get your voice heard, and without everybody unmuting, it's very tricky. And so sometimes just calling on people at random and then teaching them. If you don't know, you just say, I don't know. Kids don't know that they're allowed to say that sometimes, I think. And so I think it's powerful to teach children that it's okay to say, I don't know. And then that's an opportunity for you to talk with them and say, at what point did you get confused? Or what can I clarify for you? And it opens up a very natural conversation for people to be able to say, I just don't know. Or to be able to say, I don't raise my hand, but I really do know what's going on. So kind of being flexible and finding a mixture of ways to check for understanding, not all technology driven, but also just people driven, because that we lose a lot of that communication and learning and teaching that communication in this kind of a forum.
I love that. You talk about giving them permission, to be vulnerable in that space. That's awesome. So let's go one more on this. Go, Mr. Duenas. He's got his hand up.
That was for the last question. I answered it. Thank you.
Got it. Sorry. All right. So let's move to the next topic. So let's talk about Canvas a little bit. So using Canvas to enhance a teacher's ability to provide distance learning. Let's talk about the platform, right? Everybody wants to know what's going on. Teachers who aren't familiar with it are starting to jump in and learn about it. We got a lot in the comment section for the emails. It was all about Canvas. So who wants to jump right in on that? Don't everybody raise their hand at once. All right, Ms. Ross, you're up again.
The truth is I don't know a ton about Canvas yet, and because of my work right now, I'm working on other things, so I've yet to dive into it from any perspective. But from what I do understand, I feel like Canvas is going to do a few things. So when I tell people about what I understand, I say, well, it's going to allow easier navigation for everybody. So I think the navigating between, jumping to Nearpod or jumping to Flipgrid or those kinds of things. Flipgrid's another good one, by the way, for seeing kids' voices and seeing kids and hearing their voices. But another thing about Canvas is that it allows for feedback. So there'll be a lot more opportunities for children to record themselves talking and expressing themselves and their knowledge through their voice rather than so much typing or writing. And that's a powerful way for this. And then also opportunities for teachers to give really direct, explicit feedback, like not in the moment so much, but pause at certain points to be able to give them feedback in those times. So those were the things that really stood out to me. And I had not studied Canvas well at all, but those are the things I remember, maybe because those are the things that I value.
Thank you. And sorry putting everybody on the spot on that. Just want to get your perspective. And so it looks like Nicole's got some stuff to say about Canvas.
I haven't used it before, but I have played around with it since the district gave us our practice sandbox. And it does seem to be a lot more streamlined, that it's a lot less clicking around. And I found that once I kind of got the hang of creating pages and whatnot, that it's not as hard as it seems. And I've heard that on the other end for students, that it's a lot easier and a lot more user-friendly. So hopefully this will be easier for our younger kiddos.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable and being willing to talk about that, because I know we're all learning together in this process. So let's move from that. Let's talk about what have you learned in summer teaching that you're going to use in the fall, right? So what has worked? What are those great gems that you're going to take directly into this new adventure when we get into the fall? And we'll start with Ms. Campos.
One of the big things for me, I was also doing first going into second grade. And so they're little. And right away, the very first day that we were in the SEAL program, I said, okay, 2 hours synchronous is going to be really challenging. So I had thought, okay, I'll do small groups, but I'll probably do them the second week. I need time, that kind of thing. Well, right away, I realized I need to pull small groups. And that's where I found my engagement soar. In the small group. So I would do kind of like what Mr. Duenas was saying, where you have your whole group teaching, you break it up into chunks, you do a little break, and then I'd pull a small group. I kind of did it as a trial and error because I figured this is the time that I have. Let me try and play with it, see what I can do, and really see what works. So I told my kids, okay, we're going to go for 15 minutes. Some people are going to do some asynchronous work while I'm working with a small group. So I was always on there. They could always come back, and they did sometimes. But I would tell them in 15 minutes, and they would say, what time is that? And I would tell them what time. And I don't know, to be honest, if they put a timer. I'm not really sure. That's something I would definitely streamline for the fall. But they came back. And I thought, oh, yay, they came back. So I was so excited about that. And to see the little ones be able to do that. And then in that small group is where I really saw so much engagement. I saw them participate more. They seemed to pick up on the content. They seemed to ask more questions. It really was a workable environment, but breaking it up into those chunks. And that's something I would streamline. I've been thinking of how to do that and carry that into the fall. Because small group, we all know small group instruction is good instruction. That's where we can differentiate. So that was an important component to me.
Great, thank you for sharing. All the hands are up. I'm going to get to everybody on this one because this is a huge question, so bear with me. So let's go to Ms. Jones next on lessons learned. What are you bringing into the fall?
I'm definitely going to keep going with those surveys, checking in with them. So Pear Deck does have a feature where you're able to work in the how are you doing on this lesson, how are you feeling, that's there, and it's private. So I can see it, but all the other kids can't. But just those check-ins where, again, it's not academic, but just seeing how they're doing outside of school in general, what's going on, because that's going to help with having that new group of students, a whole new class of 7th graders that I haven't worked with before. I believe that's what made the kids want to keep coming back. So definitely using that, definitely gonna keep with the Kahoots. They love the Kahoots, make that weekly. Just anything I can do with their feedback, because that's a really great point. With their feedback, just kind of use that to mold my class and plan my lessons, listening to them and letting them know that they have a voice.
Thank you. Relationships, right? Always going back to that U6. That's so powerful, even in this difficult format. Let's go to Mr. Licone.
All right. Yeah, I have a couple of things to say. And April, thank you for bringing that up. When I first, in regards to teaching for 2 hours, I thought, great, I'm going to be able to break it up into ELA and math. And then they dropped the bomb that, hey, you're going to teach math for 2 hours. And I really started to get a little nervous about that. I wasn't sure what was going to happen for 2 hours, but breaking it up into chunks really made it doable. And the structure of SEAL, having the scope and sequence, having all of the SEL activities, shout out to Michelle Torres and all the math department for putting that together, because it really did make things very easy. And it showed that we can have a robust instruction that can be given remotely from home and still have high accountability by having principals check in, not even knowing. Our principals checking in, leaving messages on the chat board, and I had no idea that that person was there. Never interrupted the flow of the instruction, but having that structure really helped out the instruction, the flow, but also having, like I said before, the uniform hours of instruction. And that really did help keep that going. And that's what I think I take into the fall. Breaking it up into chunks will make it so much easier.
Thank you so much, Trent. All right, so just so everybody knows, I'm going to get to everybody on this question, but we have 3 minutes left for this part before we need to move into some other questions. You've actually done a great job of answering some of the emails just in these topics, but we'll jump right in. So let's go to Miss Wynn, and then we'll have Miss Shuttler next.
Uh-oh. Am I having some audio? Can you hear me? Cool. So one of the things is, even if we're on this online virtual world, we all need human connection. And so I think that's first and foremost most important, that our students need to feel connected to another human being online. And so one of the questions that I asked at the end of the program was for my incoming 8th graders was, what do you want your 8th grade teachers to know about you in the fall? And the more that we can question and elicit feedback from the kids and hear their voices and elevate their voices, the better. My heart still breaks because one of my students, he's Latino and he's an ELL learner. He wrote, I want them to know that I am not a bad person. And so you think about, like, you know, our students are coming into the classroom and without even meeting their teacher, right? I don't want my teacher to have a bad impression about who I am. And so where do we as educators, and thinking about, you know, especially with what's going on in our world right now, when we talk about equity, we talk about racial justice, where is it that we have to check ourselves and think about our tone, the way that we speak, our language? Is it loving? Is it caring? Is it for all kids? I know this is a stressful time. That's why I was stressing SEL, but we also mindful about looking at kids and humanizing them and making sure that we are doing the best that we can to make sure that they're surviving in this COVID pandemic world with us. So.
Thank you. All right, and let's move to Ms. Schottler.
How can you follow that up? But absolutely. I remember one of the videos we watched, and it was a little boy who just said, just pretend like you care. And that's all I really need. You know, just pretend that you like me. I had some friends that, you know, that needed a little bit more care and loving. So I think back to with everybody, the reflection, what I would take back into my classroom, everybody knows the importance of reflection, but time was always of the essence. And in this SEAL program, I allotted the last 15 minutes of the 2 hours to reflection every day. So they either had a Google form or a Jamboard where they're reflecting on what went well today, what didn't go well today, what would you like to do more of? And that voice was so key because I used those reflections every day and changed my classroom and adapted based on what they said. And it really built, like Mr. Duenas, you said, a community of learners because they felt like they had a voice. They felt like, and Ms. Velasco, you said the same thing, you know, like they knew that they were a part of this community. It wasn't just Mrs. Schottler saying, we're going to do this and that's it. And let's move on. The one thing I did say no to was, you know, they wanted to watch a movie. I'm like, can't do that. Let's talk about something else. But when they saw that I was changing based on what they did and I was still able to meet my standards, there was buy-in. And like Ms. Velasco said, you know, you incorporated art, attendance was there. They were engaged and they were ready to come. So that is definitely something that I would take back to my classroom, is that reflection and adapting to my students.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Ms. Ross, then we're going to go to Ms. Lopez, and I'm sorry, and then Mr. Duenas, and then we're going to move into the last part of our piece here.
I'll be super fast because everybody said a ton of amazing things. I'm just going to say fun. It has to, you have to be fun. You have to play games. You have not necessarily academic games. Just have fun and play and enjoy so that they want to come back if it's fun. So we're going to be with them for a long time every day. Let's take some of that time to have fun. And I was going to say art as well. So how can we find things that are fun? That's all.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Lopez.
A lot of great things have already been said. After today, I will definitely take back more of a reflection piece and asking my kids what they liked, what they didn't like, what was easier for them or what they struggled with. And then definitely a lot of the SEL curriculum. We spend a lot of time doing SEL at our site, just knowing where our kids are coming from, and even more so now with what they've been dealing with. So definitely taking that time for the SEL and understanding how they feel and being able to communicate that.
Thank you. And Mr. Duenas.
My advice and my takeaway for the fall is really 4 things. 1, flexibility. You have to be flexible. And then 2, give yourself grace and give kids and parents grace throughout this whole process. Number 3, climate and culture. I can't emphasize it enough. It is so important, such as those routines, structure systems, the relationships. And last but not least, we cannot forget about communication. And so we communicate with our families, our stakeholders. That's what's going to get us through.
All right, thank you. Thank you all. So we're going to, I know there's plenty we could talk about, right? This probably shouldn't have been a 2-hour Zoom. It probably would have been more effective, but we'll have more to come in the future. So let's look at some of the questions that some of the teachers have asked in our community and just see if we can help support them through that. So one that was asked was, what was the expectation for you when it came to parents? Were there parents sitting in at all? Were the parents engaged? I know there was some conversation about reaching out to parents, but let's talk a little bit about the parent piece. Was there any way that you had parents who sat in on Zooms, or there was a conversation where they did it at certain times or they didn't? Let's talk about that side of it. And it looks like we'll start with Ms. Jones.
So it wasn't so much that parents were sitting in, but I did do a lot of, I'll say maybe weekly, reaching out to parents. I used Remind for that. and I would just send them a quick text. It would be either a whole group text like, hey, we worked on X, Y, and Z. Your kid should be on Khan Academy 30 minutes every day. Like, I would just let them know what's going on. So if they're not seeing that happen, then that's a challenge. Or if I would see that work is not getting done, I would then have to reach out. That's going to be a lot more this fall in terms of like the sheer volume of students that we're going to have, especially at the middle school level and high school. But that's part of it. That's the whole thing with the remote learning. We have to make those connections. I had a parent kind of fuss with me and say her student was on the computer all day long. And it's like, okay, I don't know what he was doing, but he wasn't in class. So just making sure that we reach out and keep parents aware. It can be overwhelming. So I would say at least once a week, if you can just reach out.
Thank you. Ms. Velasco, do you have your hand up? Perfect. All right, go for it.
So for me, it was a little bit different because I was working with newcomer families. So I understood that the needs were critical in terms of systems and how the system might work. Some of my families had only been here for 3 months, which meant that they came right at the time that we went online. So there were a lot of that. So I did something that I had never done before, which is I gave my cell phone number out to parents because I wanted to make that initial connection with them and for them to ask me any questions that they might have had about computers, hotspots, internet access, anything. So those were not set expectations, but those were what the needs were for my families. So I was in contact with them every single day for whatever need that they might have. And some of those needs were not academic needs. And some of those needs were questions that they might have had about community services or things of that nature. So I think that for what I'm going to do differently this upcoming year, because we are going to start online, is that I'm going to reach out to my parents before school starts and make that connection with them. The difference is that these are families that some of them already know me at my site, so it will take less time. But I think I found it especially necessary during these times because families are dealing with different things and their needs vary. So I want to meet them where they're at and then go from there.
Thank you. And I have to say right now, as a teacher, if you were my students, this is amazing because all the hands keep coming up. Everybody wants to share, which is a testament to our teachers and our administrators and supporting our students. So I'm going to randomly pick one person to finish this question off because I want to get a few more and we are running out of time. So Ms. Schottler, you want to respond to the parent connection?
Absolutely. Thank you. We were asked to communicate with the parents before seal, whether it be an email or other form, a phone call. And it was my first time using Google Voice. So Ms. Velasco, don't give out your cell phone number, get a Google Voice number. And I got 100% of parents getting back to me through Google Voice. Text messages, as a parent myself, I answer text messages faster than I do an email or a phone call voice message. And it held true for my students. I also held a get to know me before school started, and I had 5 parents show up, but some who couldn't make it, I shared the information with them that way. But one of the things that I thought was neat in the silver lining in this virtual world is that parents were a natural part of my classroom. You know, when we did fun 4 corners, like what's your favorite item for breakfast? And they would hear me talking like, oh, I love breakfast burritos. And, you know, they're like, oh, this is a great place. I mean, I had parents texting me restaurants and, you know, so it was nice to get to know the parents as well as the students at the same time. And by week 4, they were waving on their way, you know, before class started. So that was definitely a silver lining, is that the parents are in your community as well.
That's awesome, right? I mean, that just the ability for us to connect that. I mean, it's in a regular year, you got back to school night, you have open house, and but they're in the living room with you. You know, I think that's pretty powerful. All right, so let's talk about students who miss something. So Ms. Jones, I think you talked a little bit about this, but let's talk about when students were there, were things recorded and then students could access it after? What was kind of the process? So Ms. Jones, I'll start with you on that question.
I'm sorry, absolutely. I recorded everything, and it was on our weekly agenda, and I would remind them, and I would point that out. Everything is there. It is recorded. The entire class is recorded. You can watch it. You can watch bits and pieces of it. So if you had to miss class, and I would let them know, life happens. It happens. There's a lot going on with us right now. So if you, for whatever reason, weren't in class, the expectation was that they were going to watch class, so that when they showed up again, they knew exactly what was going on. And they would remind each other of that, which I really appreciated. Hey, did you watch the video? Like, you need to go watch the video. She talked about it in the video. And that was the biggest thing. Just make sure that it's recorded. And it takes about, when I did it on Google Meet, it would take maybe like 5-10 minutes. And then I would just take that recording, put it right on the agenda, and they all had access to it throughout the entire class. So anything they missed was recorded. It was 100% there.
Anybody else want to jump in on that? Is good. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Thank you. So how did you handle, let's talk assessments. So trying to assess mastery, proficiency, what was some of the tips or processes with assessments, maybe struggles, lessons learned, anything to do with assessment? So no assessment happened. That's what you're telling. No, just kidding. All right, Mr. Duenas, start us off.
It's a great question, and I think part of my hesitation, I'm going to be very open and honorable, open and honest and vulnerable. It was 4 weeks, and so it took time to build the relationship, to build the trust through the engagement, and because it was, again, first graders going into the second grade, it took longer than I would have wanted to. And so frankly, the type of formative assessment that we're used to, the traditional, it's not what will work for this virtual online. And so when you're talking about foundational skills and phonemic awareness and hearing, when technology is the challenge, then how do you assess? And so that's a great question, and I don't have an answer yet.
Thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable. I think that's when we talk about all being this together, that's a reality we have to face and move through that. So let's go to Ms. Ross and Ms. Schottler, and then I got a couple more questions before we end the session.
So I would say, I think that the idea for SEAL is different. I also was in the classroom in the spring, so it also felt different because there was a different call. But some formative assessment tools that were actually embedded in SEAL, it's just a matter of being able to figure out how to pull those small groups, really. And because I have a friend who would do small groups, and all of her small groups were fluency work. So she was able to formatively assess, listen to children reading, see where they were with their decoding work. So she did that on a daily basis. And so she got to hear kids read every day. So that's assessment. You know, it's formative assessment. It's not summative. Having a shared slide deck is an opportunity where you can see them all live and working. And when someone's not doing it, you can quickly say, again, like a Jamboard or whatever, how can I help you? And what I like about a shared slide deck is that I can actually go in and physically support them. Let me help you. I might do this, and then help them physically do some of the work as they're getting comfortable with the technology. And then Jamboard is also a way of seeing, Whiteboard Fi is a way of seeing what they're doing to be able to formatively assess and to give feedback, like right in that moment. Also, the picture taking and uploading it to a chart is another form of formative assessment, so you can see what they're doing. And it's a little bit less invasive than, say, Jamboard. When everybody's seeing what you're doing, you know, so there's different, you have to think about what's going to work best for the group of children that you're serving.
Thank you. And we're so close to the end. I wish we had another hour to do this. So Ms. Schottler, you are going to get the final word for this portion.
Once again, all the pressure. But I think, like Ms. Ross just mentioned, summative wasn't really done during SEAL or during the end of this year, which is different. But in my pedagogy, is formative assessment is to drive your instruction to get your students to that content standard. And listening to students read, or listening to what students notice and wonder in a math problem, or what they answer and how they answer, are all formative assessments to guide my instruction to get them to that big understanding. So I looked at all the things mentioned, Ms. Ross mentioned, is looking at their slide deck, looking at their work that they uploaded, to gather that data to teach the next day. So the assessment was ongoing all the time. It wasn't formal and a Google form. And sometimes you can do that, but who's answering the question, right? Is it Google answering the question, or a parent? So I liked the formative assessments where it was a picture being taken, or they were working right as we were working.
Thank you so much. All right, I got to get a little closure, but please, everybody, stay on if you can once the broadcast ends, just so we can chat really, really quickly. I want to respect your time, but I just want to thank all of our panelists for being here and being willing to engage and support the whole community, and for the work that you did this summer. I mean, for our students and really supporting them. That's what matters the most. It's really appreciated. To audience at home, this will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel at lbschools.net/YouTube. Takes about 3 to 5 business days to go up, because we do send it out for English and Spanish captioning, so it's a little more accessible. So that will be up in a few days, and we will be doing more of these panel info sessions over the coming weeks. I'm excited to share as much information as possible with our whole community and to learn from each other. And I think today that was really what this one was all about, of you sharing your best practices, your lessons learned, and what you've gone through in these experiences as we charge into this new frontier. So to our audience at home, always check lbschools.net for updated information. You can also follow us on Twitter at lbschools. You can also follow us on Instagram at Long Beach USD, or check us out on Facebook at Long Beach Unified School District. Thank you very much, and have a great day.